Hey everybody, welcome back to Jess Plays Exile Election. We're here today and we're going to be doing our very last story time for the entire game. Because I believe we've already done everyone already. So basically what I'm going to do is I have two peeps left to do. And that is Ninchoji Issei and our protagonist, Issei and Kaname. So I'm going to do these two, we're going to wrap these up, and then depending on how long they take, we might go a little bit further in the game and see what happens. I apologize because this episode's gonna go up a little bit late, because I had to record it late, because yesterday I was supposed to get home on time, and then I didn't, and I got home late, and then today I was supposed to get home on time, and then I didn't, and I was late. This past weekend was pretty busy. One of my buds from study abroad got married, on Sunday, which is why I didn't stream with Nate that day, and, I got to see a bunch of friends that I hadn't seen in a while, who are, you know, still around in Japan. Like, obviously the Japanese ones are still around, but, like some of the other ones, I got to see one of my Taiwanese friends, and I got to see, one of my Filipina friends, and, like, oh, it was so much fun, because, like, I've known them for, like, 10 years now, which is really sobering. Anyway, let's read about eating people. Okay. That day there was record-breaking that day, tucked away in our small house in the mountains, there was record-breaking snowfall, the most that had fallen in decades. You know, I'm gonna once and for all kind of, like, actually make an effort to figure out what the fuck this woman's name is. Give me one sec here. Because I'm looking at it and, like, there's the way that, like, I want to pronounce it, and then, there's the way that it's probably pronounced, which is probably not that. Give me a name. God damn it, all the ones that I thought were possible. I'm just gonna make a choice here. Oh man. Let's go with Saiki. Because it could be Saiki, Saeki, Sahaku, Saheki. We'll go with Saiki. For the fun pun in English too. Alright. Myself and the family maid, Saiki-san, were trapped in my father's vacation home, listening to the news in one of the rooms. Your mother and father were supposed to arrive around tomorrow, but if it's snowing this much, that might be a little bit tough, huh? My father worked in the city. My father worked in the city, and my mother's performances took place in the city. Since my parents were always busy, I often didn't run into them. And so, it was rather normal for myself and the maid to be spending time together. My mother and father had met and fallen in love. and had never actually intended to have me. Perhaps they felt bad about that, and that was why they spent so much time away from me. I suppose that having Saiki-san around to take care of me and look after me made me much better off than countless other people. Well then, I will go and prepare some supper. Alright, thanks. She always spoke to me politely. Even though I was just the child of the people who had hired her. I certainly didn't mind being treated as well as I was. Okay. There was a good distance between us, an appropriate distance. We weren't so close that things were uncomfortable, but we weren't so far away that I felt lonely. Sometimes I would think that maybe she didn't have emotions at all. Like me, she didn't seem to have a whole lot of interest in other people. It's just the kind of person she was. She was the kind of person who took pride in her work, as if she had some sort of goals she was aspiring to, that made doing all the things she did, living, and being part of society worth it. I mean, this was all my own, just my own conjecture. So, and I suppose I never really knew what kind of person she truly was. However, with regards to her, I felt the closest to her, and I did carry a seed of respect for her. The third day after we lost contact with the outside world. According to the last news we had heard, all the roads leading out to where we were had been blocked, and there was no way to reach the cottage where we were staying. Obviously, there was no hope that my parents would show up. When Saiki-san and I had come here, so we had brought several days' worth of food and kindling with us. Obviously, we were hoping that for the remaining week after my parents came, they would bring the rest of the supplies. And so, we didn't have an excess of anything. Fortunately, the stove was prepped for the winter before we had arrived. And so there was no danger of us freezing to death. Don't worry, Issei-san. Somehow the roads will become passable again, and then the two of them will join us post-haste. The two of us were sitting on the couch drinking warm coffee, and Saiki-san had said this to try and calm me down. I'm not worried. Even though I said that, I did have quite a few things I was concerned about. Anyway, enough about that. I'm kinda hungry. What are we gonna eat today? Well, we're going to have some warm vegetable soup and... At that moment, from the door... a terrible sound like that of a tree being sliced in half, crashed into the room. I'm going to go take a look. Please wait here for a moment, Issei-san. Is that okay? Yes, it is all right. Saiki-san wrapped her own stall around my neck and went to go check the door. I stared at the window over her shoulder. It was already about half filled with snow. Snow, meaning that it had reached my exact height. 150 centimeters had already lain on the ground. For the Americans who could possibly be watching this, I'm 5 feet tall and I'm 153 centimeters. It's a lot of snow. Even though it was early afternoon, because of the snow, it was dark in the room. Thanks to the fire going in the stove. Okay. Thanks to the fire in the stove, however, it wasn't so bad that it was bothering us. Although I will say that having that much snow on the ground did make me worry a little bit. It was difficult for me to imagine how heavy the snow could be. But if all of that was resting on that poor weak little door, that could probably explain that sound we just heard. Would the window be okay? Since it seems we are not able to go outside, we will have to use all of the provisions that we have stored here for kindling, and also for food. I believe we have about 2 days worth left. I could feel a slight bit of panic threaded through the words of this woman who had been staying so calm since the very beginning. Since it was understandable under the circumstances. It was understandable under the circumstances, but I knew she wasn't trying to make me hear it. I wasn't too concerned about the kindling, but the fact that we couldn't leave the cottage was a whole different story. Well then, I'm going to prepare the food, so please wait for a moment. Okay. 2 more days. After that... Okay. After that, what would happen to the two of us if no one showed up? Okay. Sitting there in the warm room, it didn't feel as though it were a real possibility. Despite that, it was only a few steps away from us. I could feel the cold creeping ever closer, and I wrapped myself up more in her stall. I started to feel sleepy, listening to the sound of the stew bubbling in the pot. I could smell the smell of soup wafted through the air in the room, and that made me feel a lot better. Even though Saiki-san Even though Saiki-san was currently preparing soup, there were several times when she passed through the living room in order to get to the storage room. I sat there and how do I want to translate Bonyari? I sat there and idly thought that this was exactly how a family would act. Alright, it's prepared. Saiki-san's voice brought me back to myself. And then, drowning out her voice, was the sound of glass shattering. Issei-san, hurry! Come here! There had been very few times when I had heard her lose her cool in her voice. It told me immediately the kind of danger I was in. From the broken window and into the living room, snow poured through the hole. Take this, go to the second floor. Upon saying that, she passed me a blanket and a backpack. It was probably... She had probably prepared it and stuffed it full of provisions so that we wouldn't have to come back to the kitchen in case we couldn't come back to the kitchen. Okay. Saiki-san took her travel bag and then took my hand. Travel shoes, sorry. After that, 4 more days passed. The second floor was my bedroom. Was my bedroom, and to keep me warm, and to keep ourselves warm, Saiki-san and I were rolled up in a blanket. I began to lose my sense of consciousness to the cold and the hunger. Saiki-san told me several different things, or many different things. I started to fall asleep, listening to her singing singing the child protection song. We'll just sonomama it. As I slipped off to sleep, I was wrapped in the feeling that I might never wake up again. Death had crept up before my eyes. The piled snow had now broken the windows on the second floor, and the howling wind and snow was swirling about the room. At first, the woman gave the boy her own blood. It was not only to wet or to rehydrate him, but it was probably also to warm him. The boy struggled to get the blood down, fighting nausea and the urge to throw up. The anemic woman, meanwhile, soon gave herself to the boy. Fighting starvation, Issei left his teeth marks in her arm. Breaking through the skin, he was met with a feeling of softness, and once again the taste of blood entered his mouth. He couldn't swallow it, but he didn't die. That was when the mountain rescue team arrived. Issei didn't know the exact moment when the woman had died. Since her body was still warm. Okay. Since the body was still warm, and blood was still pouring from the wound, from her self-inflicted wound, and from the bite marks from the boy. The only thing he could remember was her final moment. It was... I'm trying to think of how to... What's the opposite of fresh? Unfresh. The sour feeling was not one that he could put into words. And he decided that he would have to interpret her final words himself. Surely, this is what she must have said, right? The room was dark, the piled snow having already covered the glass shards from the window. They were reaching the end of the canned goods that Saiki-san had brought from the basement storage. The tiny bits of food clinging to the aluminum were already rancid. However, the smell didn't bother us, since we were encrusted in urine and feces by that point. In fact, the smell of the rotten food helped to battle our ravenous appetites. Wrapped in the blanket, Saiki-san said over and over, "Death is not something to fear. It's simply a new beginning." It sounded like something that would be coming from some sort of religious figure, and at that moment, I just accepted it. When we die, our bodies become meat and earth, and our bones become dust. And with this, the circle of life continues. Thinking that way put me at ease somewhat. And then we return to the earth, and help other things live. However, despite this, somewhere deep inside me, I knew I wasn't ready to die yet. The entire universe, it's all connected. Do you understand, Issei-san? Not yet. You, me, we're both part of that life. It's the same. It's the same for the animals that we've been eating. Barely able to hang on to my own consciousness. The words that she was saying felt as if they were being decreed by God, and they resonated within my heart. Therefore, the two of us will never die. We're simply born again. Saiki-san? That might have been the last thing that Saiki-san ever said. After that, she didn't speak again. And her body was still warm. Perhaps that was just her way of accepting her impending death. Perhaps it was just a lie to put myself at ease since I was a small child. But the only thing I remember feeling was hunger. The painful, unending starvation. And so, I ate her. I had a feeling that her lips were moving, but it might have just been my imagination. She was just part of the great life that we were all part of. And so if I were to partake of her, then wouldn't she become part of me too? Or perhaps we were both just fragments of a much larger cycle. I curled up in the still warm blood and fell asleep, in the fetal position. I was no longer afraid of never waking up again. The next time I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. My parents, more for their own sake than mine, were crying. Staring at them as if they were complete strangers, I started crying too. I still don't know where the tears came from. If I was crying for Saiki-san, or perhaps for myself, I was never sure. After that, I started to believe more in the fact that there was one huge life that we were all connected to. Though I never met another person I was as connected to as Saiki-san, there were plenty of people who became one with me. I was able to understand them. I was able to understand them. They were able to feel joy, and they wanted to become part of me. On the other hand, there was no one who would understand me, or I understood them. I understood them, and they were happy, and they wanted to become part of me. On the other hand, it was a shame that no one would ever understand me. After that, I decided that I would take it upon myself to continue the circle of life. As long as the other person was willing, I would never force someone to dinner who didn't want to join. Only once, there was one woman whom I couldn't understand. She went off and she moved to go live off in the countryside. But I never chased her. I continued on with my life, and I felt as if I started to understand her somewhat. However, the way that she felt did not fit into my grander scheme. It was at that moment that I remembered her final words. I couldn't hear them, her true final words. I wonder if this is what she wanted to say. Was I delicious? That was what she had said, the one who had become part of me. The one within me, her true words. I wondered, would I say that too someday? And at that point, would I truly, really become one with the universe? From that day on, I was reborn. Okay. I burst back into life, fed, or I guess, suckling a soup of fresh, warm blood. So I have two things to say about this, because I feel like this is referencing two things. The very overt one is it's referencing that dude who lives in, like, God, where does he live? He lives in Roppongi or some shit. He lives in Tokyo. And he's this, like, ridiculously creepy looking motherfucker. And he cannibalized this, like, Austrian woman, like 20 years ago or something like that. And she apparently was a consenting party to this, and so he's never been, like, arrested or anything. He's still just, like, out living his life. And he has, like, some sort of fetish for eating foreigners or some shit. I don't know. But, I should probably be more concerned about that than I am. Considering how well marbled I am. But, yeah, so I feel like it's a reference to that, because he had this whole weird thing about how, like, he and the woman, like, mutually, consensually decided that he was gonna kill and eat her, and, you know, whatever, and, like, nobody knows what really happened, like, at the end there, except for him, so, but they couldn't prove anything, so he was never convicted. So that's part of it. The other part of it, I wonder, is if this is not another jab at, like, SGI, because I feel like, so, like, the whole, like, main part of SGI is actually pretty chill, and they're fine, and they're just like, yay, we want to go and, like, be super saccharine about stuff and do some chanting, and it's all good. But, like, there are some people who are, like, in, like, fringe groups that are somewhat kinda sort of affiliated with them, and then, so they end up getting, like, roped in with all of these, like, extreme terrorist groups and stuff like that. And I'm not gonna go into a ton of detail about this because, like, I want to get moving on the rest of this episode, but the, basically, like, one of their core beliefs is, because it's like a sect of Buddhism, right? One of their core beliefs is about, like, oh yeah, everything in the universe is connected, and blah 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 blah. And just, like, it reminded me of that. Because I know a lot of people who are in SGI, and, like, yeah, a lot of people are like, oh, it's a cult. And, like, yeah, it is very cult-like, but, like, so is my work. So, I just feel like Japanese people are very susceptible and primed for cults. And I think it's an element and a not so great side effect of certain cultural attitudes. Because when you have a culture that very much emphasizes conformity and hierarchy and not questioning what those in power say, traditionally, right? It does make your society very susceptible to cults. And so for the most part, like, I can't say that SGI isn't a cult, because there are certain things about it where I'm like, it's a little cultish. But, it's, God, I hope none of my friends watch this. I don't really want to offend them. But, I will say that, it's mostly, like, in, like, a benign kind of way. Like, there's nothing really, like, I was never pushed to be recruited or anything like that, except for like one time where my friend was really worried about me because I was like super depressed, and so she was like, oh, I feel like you really need a support system, and like religion's a good way to like build this good support system. And I was like, I appreciate it and I love you to death, but no, gonna decline. And she dropped it after that, so it's cool. But it's just kind of whew. Anyway, so that reminded me of that. Let's go read about Kaname. Have we even read any of Kaname yet? I feel like we must have had to. But I think I lacked the context for it before, so I was like, what the fuck is he talking about? No, I think I have read this, at least the beginning of it before. But let's finish out Kaname. Okay. She was always a little funny after that day. Ever since Ichika's mother suddenly wasn't around anymore. That day too passed just like any other, and the next day, and the one after that. And I thought that it would never change. However, despite that people's deaths were always sudden, people's deaths are always sudden and always shatter the daily routine. There was obviously no way for us to go back to normal. All we had left were our fun memories. And in the moments when we could chase off the sad memories, that was when people began to heal from a death. Despite that, it took time. Perhaps what took the most time to accept. Okay. Perhaps what was the hardest to bear was a death where there wasn't time to accept what was happening. When something so senseless and suddenly came down from the heavens, a death like that would take a long time to get over. Sounds like Dad's not going to be eating with me today again, so let's eat together. It was about a week after her mother's death. Ichika called us to her house and prepared dinner with us. Since we lived next door, we had both been friends since we had been small. And even though that was it, both Ichika and her mother really took care of both Misa and myself after we lost our parents so early. Okay. Losing Ichika's mother hit Misa extremely hard. It was like losing her own family all over again. However, it was not comparable whatsoever to what her true daughter Ichika was feeling. Ichika, teetering on the brink, continued to invite us over for dinner. And we began going over, helping her begin to heal. But then there came the day when Ichika's father didn't return home. It wasn't that we didn't get along with Ichika's father. Obviously, we liked seeing the parents of someone we were close with, and sometimes we would eat together. Yet somewhere in my heart I felt as though there was something off about him. I figured it was just because he was a middle-aged guy and had other middle-aged guys sometimes showing up at the house. And since it seemed like nothing that he did ever seemed to bother Ichika's mother, I figured that he was just keeping a respectful distance. Since Ichika's mother was truly the center of their three-person family, the moment that she was gone, everything completely collapsed. Even though it was difficult to bear, or difficult to understand, in reality, Ichika's mother was gone. Even though I felt as though I should keep my distance, even though I felt as though I should keep my distance and keep my feelings reserved on it, that night I felt somewhat relieved that Ichika's father didn't come home. Whenever I met him since then, we would only exchange a word or two. We'd only exchange a word or two, and I realized that this had been happening more often than not. Since that night way back when we had eaten with Ichika, she missed 3 days of school. After that, it was 1 month, and there was no word from Ichika whatsoever. The night of Ichika's second day missing from school, Misa and I went over to her house and rang the doorbell, but there was no answer, and all of the lights were turned off. We were concerned about the fact that maybe she wasn't feeling well, but it wasn't just that. I also felt a strong sense of unease unfolding in my heart. I tried asking the school, but they said that they had heard from her father that she was staying home because of an illness. Even if she had been sick, this was the first time she missed an entire month of school. And it was extremely strange to not hear from her for over a month. Hey, big bro. Let's go over to Ichika Onechan's house again. Misa said while we were walking home after school. Ichika and the two of us often walked home together. And during this past month, the main thing that the two of us have been talking about was Ichika. Ichika probably would have just wanted us to go along with what the school had said, but I still would have felt better if I heard it from her herself. And since I had experience with losing family members, I felt as though I could talk to her. Yeah, why don't we do that? But if she's not feeling well, we go home right away, okay? I tried to answer as if I wasn't actually excited to go over myself, but Misa smiled at me. Seems like you're pretty happy. So I guess in reality you also want to go over there too, huh? Aw, I bet you're lonely since you haven't been able to see Ichiko One-san for a while. One-chan. At that point, my relationship with Ichiko was just as a childhood friend. But we should have both known how we felt about each other. We hadn't really put it into words yet, but it was really just a matter of time. I mean, and both myself and Misa, and probably Ichika knew that as well. Unfortunately, as I realized later, things wouldn't have been just that simple. And that was because of what happened after this. Before Ichika and I could talk about how we felt about each other, the circumstances forced us into a particular decision that we weren't ready to accept. When we arrived at Ichika's house, we rang the bell, but as expected, no one answered. Looks like they're not home. Misa mumbled, concerned. And then, she remembered to add, couldn't they possibly be inside? Bro, can't you hear something? No. Can you see something? It was pretty common for Misa to play tricks on me, but when it came to Ichika, she wouldn't have said something like that. I wanted to look into this further myself. I decided that before arriving. And when Ichika said that to me, it seemed as if it were giving me a green light to go ahead. This isn't really a good thing to do, but alright, since we're worried about Ichika, I guess we've gotta. Using that excuse, I concentrated. If somebody had been talking, it would have been much easier for me to tell. But based on what I could see, I didn't see anyone talk. I knew that no one was talking. I'm clarifying here because, like, it's implied, but he's using the synesthesia thing. Everything I was picking up right now was just the usual sounds of life. When people are living their normal, as long as people are living their normal daily lives, there are countless different sounds that result from that. The sound of people walking over flooring. The sound of clothes rustling against the fabric of a sofa. I wouldn't have even cared if I just heard somebody breathing. But in Ichika's completely vacant house, I couldn't hear a single thing. It was like listening to a speaker that wasn't tuned to anything. I could hear the sound of the refrigerator humming. And once I took that out of the equation, if I analyzed the color that I could see, I realized that there was somebody inside the house. However, looks like they're not home, huh? Really? Really? At a time like this, I would have thought your weird power would have come in handy. Weird. Listen, I mean, you're not wrong, Misa, but... well, where did they go? See, I like real Misa because it seems like real Misa in this memory is more like sassy and like has a personality, as opposed to like the naughty thing. I'd been trying to fight back. I'd been trying to counter that horrible thing she had said, but Misa completely ignored me and continued. And then, upon the realization that she hit upon, I noticed a small thread of the color of fear thread through Misa's voice. You don't think she's collapsed inside somewhere? If she had, I'm pretty sure her dad would have noticed. What if her dad's collapsed too? Well, I mean, I doubt it, but I can't say that it's definitely not the case. I mean, it certainly was possible. Hang on a second. Let's look into this one more time. Upon saying that, Misa put on my headphones. Or upon saying that to Misa, I put on my headphones. I didn't really have a whole lot of interest in music, but the reason I had purchased them at such a high price was because the sounds and colors of normal daily life would sometimes become overwhelming and make me a little bit would become overwhelming. So in the end, it was actually well worth the money. Originally, I didn't think I would actually use the feature very much, but in the end, it turned out that the noise cancelling was actually extremely helpful. It could shut out all the other sounds, except for the sound of people talking. If I were able to use this feature, then I could talk to people in crowded, noisy places. And ever since I had realized that, it had become my own personal, it had become my own personal treasure. Alright, quiet now. Upon saying that to Misa, I began to concentrate. The sound of breathing, just like someone's voice, is unique to every person. For Misa, it was a slightly green, slightly light blue color, and Ichika's was a light pink. Ignoring the nearby light blue, I searched for a light pink color. Probably about 1 minute passed. It's true. I could see Ichika's voice. But it was so weak. And there was no way she could be talking to someone else. It was such a pale color that, under normal circumstances, I probably would have overlooked it. But at that point, I could see it clearly. Ichika was, without a doubt, calling for me. Oh, okay, I guess you don't get 3. Okay, well, we're done with story time, everybody. We've finished, all of the story times for all the characters, as far as I know, if I remember correctly. So all 12 of them, with the exception of Nori, who's probably Misa anyway, we're good. So I'm gonna go ahead and save here and end, and then next week we are gonna go ahead and tackle hopefully the end of the game. I'm hoping that this next part, if it's not too long to get through, then I can just finish it up in one thing, and then I'll start a new game from the following week. But yeah, we'll see. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with us for Storytime this week. Next week we get back to plot. Yay! Alright everybody, take it easy, and I'll see you later.